What if everything you believe about yourself isn't actually yours? What if the voice in your head, the one that doubts you, judges you, holds you back, was never truly your voice to begin with? And what if, right now, in this very moment, you could begin to see through the fog and remember who you really are? Take a slow breath and just notice you are here, listening, aware, present, and that awareness, that quiet observer within you, has always been there. Even when your thoughts were loud, even when life felt overwhelming, even when you felt lost. And as you begin to settle into this space, you may start to sense something subtle, that life, as you have known it, has been shaped by invisible agreements, ideas you accepted long ago without question, beliefs about who you should be, how you should act, what is right, what is wrong, all silently guiding your choices. From the very beginning, your attention was gently captured by family, by society, by teachers, by culture, and slowly, layer by layer, a world was built inside your mind, a kind of dream you didn't even realize you were dreaming. In that dream, you learned to label yourself, good or bad, worthy or unworthy, capable or limited, and without noticing, you began to measure your life against these invisible rules. And maybe, as you listen right now, you can recognize how often you've judged yourself, how many times you've replayed a mistake, felt guilt, or told yourself you're not enough. And yet, no one taught you how to question these thoughts. You were only taught to believe them. And so the mind becomes crowded, a constant noise, a quiet chaos, voices overlapping, opinions clashing, a fog that makes it difficult to see clearly, difficult to feel peace. But here's where something begins to shift, because the moment you become aware of this, the moment you see that these beliefs were learned, not chosen, you begin to loosen their grip. And as that awareness grows, you may begin to notice something powerful, that your words, the way you speak to yourself and others, carry immense energy, shaping not only your world, but your inner reality. Think about it. How many times have you spoken harshly to yourself, called yourself weak, incapable, not good enough, and how deeply those words settled into your heart? Your word is not just sound, it is creation. It plants seeds in the mind, and those seeds grow into your reality, into your confidence, your fears, your identity. So imagine, just for a moment, what would change if your words became gentle, honest, aligned with truth, if instead of attacking yourself, you supported yourself. And as that thought settles in, something else begins to unfold, the realization that not everything that touches you belongs to you. Because people speak from their own fears, their own wounds, their own beliefs, and when you take their words personally, you unknowingly carry their pain as your own. But what if you didn't? What if you could listen without absorbing, observe, without reacting, exist, without needing validation? There is a quiet freedom in that, a space where you no longer feel attacked by the world, because you understand it was never about you. And from that space, you begin to see another pattern. How often assumptions have shaped your emotions, how many times you believed something without asking, without clarity, and suffered because of it. A look, a message, a silence, and the mind creates a story, filling in gaps with fear, turning uncertainty into conflict. But when you pause, when you question, when you choose curiosity over assumption, something softens, something opens, and slowly, almost gently, you begin to reclaim your power, not by controlling the world, but by understanding your mind. And still, even with all this awareness, you remain human. You will have days where you fall back into old patterns, moments where emotions rise, where clarity fades, and that's where the final shift quietly arrives. Not perfection, but effort. Not pressure, but presence. To simply do your best in each moment, knowing that your best will change, some days strong, some days fragile, and both are valid. Because your best is not a fixed standard, It is a living expression of who you are in this moment. And when you honor that, you release the need for constant self-judgment. And as all of this begins to weave together, awareness, words, perception, effort, you start to notice something extraordinary. The fog begins to lift, not all at once, but slowly, revealing glimpses of clarity, of peace, of a self that was never broken, only buried under layers of belief. And in that quiet clarity, you may begin to feel lighter, not because life has changed, but because your relationship with it has. Now, before we continue deeper into this journey together, take a moment. If something within you resonated, if you feel even a slight shift in your awareness, gently support this space by liking this audiobook and pressing subscribe, so this message can reach those who may still be lost in that fog, waiting to remember themselves. And as you return your attention inward, just notice your breath, your presence, and the subtle truth beginning to awaken within you, that perhaps you were never as limited as you once believed, and this journey is only just beginning. You are born free, but everywhere you are gently taught how not to be. And as I say this, I want you to sit with that feeling for a moment, because if you look back at your life, not with judgment, but with quiet awareness, you may begin to notice that the person you believe yourself to be was not created in a single moment, but slowly shaped over time, through repetition, through approval, through correction, through love mixed with fear, and without realizing it. You began to accept a version of reality that was handed to you, not chosen by you, and this is where the story truly begins, not in the world outside, but inside your mind, where a silent agreement was formed again and again, until it became your truth. And as that truth settled within you, it started to define everything: how you see yourself, how you see others, how you react, how you feel, and even what you believe is possible for your life. Because from a very young age, your attention was captured, your focus directed, your mind guided to see the world in a certain way. And through simple repetition, through words spoken by parents, teachers, society, you learn what is right and what is wrong, what is acceptable and what is not, what is beautiful and what is not. And slowly, these ideas became so deeply rooted that you stopped questioning them. You stopped seeing them as beliefs and started seeing them as facts. And in that process, something very subtle yet powerful happened. You were domesticated, not in a harsh or visible way, but gently, emotionally, psychologically, trained through a system of reward and punishment, where being accepted felt like love and being rejected felt like pain. And so you adapted, you adjusted, you shaped yourself to fit expectations because you wanted to belong, you wanted to be seen, you wanted to be enough, and this desire became so strong that you began to abandon parts of yourself, hiding your true thoughts, suppressing your natural expression, becoming who you thought you needed to be instead of who you truly are. And as you continued to grow, this conditioning didn't stop. It simply changed form, because at some point, you no longer needed others to guide you. You became your own judge, your own critic, your own punisher, carrying within you a set of invisible rules, a kind of inner law that constantly evaluates everything you do, everything you think, everything you feel, and every time you don't meet those standards, you feel guilt, shame, or fear, not because you are wrong, but because you were taught to believe you are. And this is where suffering quietly takes root, not in reality itself, but in the interpretation of reality, in the belief that you are not enough, not worthy, not complete. And so you begin to live in a constant state of inner conflict, where one part of you wants to be free, while another part holds you back, where one part dreams, while another doubts. And this inner struggle becomes so normal that you forget what peace feels like. And yet, even in the middle of this mental noise, this fog of thoughts and judgments, there is something within you that remains untouched, something that observes without reacting, something that is aware without judging. And that awareness is your doorway to freedom. Because the moment you become aware of your conditioning, you create distance between you and it. And in that space, you begin to see clearly. And as you begin to see clearly, you realize that many of the beliefs you carry are not true. They are simply agreements you made, often without choice, often without understanding. And once you see them as agreements, you also realize something empowering, that what has been agreed upon can be changed, rewritten, transformed, and this realization alone begins to shift your inner world. And slowly, gently, you start to question the voice in your head, the one that judges, the one that criticizes, the one that tells you who you are. And instead of blindly believing it, you observe it. You listen without attachment. And in doing so, you begin to reclaim your power because you are no longer controlled by every thought. You are no longer defined by every belief. And this is where emotional freedom begins, not by changing the world outside, but by understanding the world within, by recognizing that your reactions are shaped by your beliefs, your fears are rooted in old agreements, and your suffering is often created by the way you interpret events, not the events themselves. And as this understanding deepens, you may start to feel a sense of lightness, a quiet release, as if something heavy is slowly being lifted, because you no longer have to carry every belief, you no longer have to obey every inner command. You can choose, consciously, what to keep and what to let go, what aligns with your truth and what is not. And in this space of awareness, you begin to reconnect with your authentic self, the part of you that existed before the conditioning, before the labels, before the expectations, a self that is naturally peaceful, naturally whole, naturally enough. And as you reconnect with this part, your relationship with yourself begins to change, becoming more compassionate, more understanding, more real. And as your inner world shifts, so does your outer experience, because you start to respond instead of react. You start to listen instead of assume. You start to accept instead of judge, and life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a flow, not because challenges disappear, but because your perception transforms. And through this journey, you come to understand something deeply profound, that freedom is not something you find outside. It is something you remember within, something that has always been there, waiting beneath the layers of belief, beneath the noise of the mind, beneath the dream you were taught to live. And as you continue to walk this path, gently, patiently, with awareness and intention, you begin to create a new dream, not one built on fear or limitation, but one rooted in truth, in presence, in conscious choice, where you are no longer just a participant in life, but a creator, shaping your reality with clarity, with authenticity, with purpose. And in this quiet realization, something within you settles, not as an ending, but as a beginning, a soft awakening to the truth that you are not bound by what you were taught. You are not limited by what you believed. You are not defined by the dream of the past. Because in this very moment, with awareness as your guide, you have the power to see differently, to choose differently, to live differently. And as you breathe into that possibility, you may start to feel it, subtle yet undeniable. That freedom you were always searching for has been within you all along. Your words are not just sounds, they are spells, quietly shaping the reality you live in. And as I say this, I want you to slow down and really feel the depth of it, because somewhere in your daily life, in the way you speak to yourself, in the way you speak to others, you are constantly creating something, often without awareness, often without intention. And yet the impact of those words travels far beyond the moment they are spoken, settling into the mind, taking root, growing into beliefs, and those beliefs, over time, begin to define your entire experience of life. And as you begin to notice this, you may realize how casually words are used, how easily they are thrown into conversations, into thoughts, into judgments. And yet each one carries energy, Each one carries direction, either building something within you or quietly tearing something down. And this is where the first shift begins, when you recognize that your word is not neutral. It is powerful, it is creative, it is alive in a way that shapes your inner world continuously. And as this awareness deepens, you may start to remember moments from your own life, times when a single sentence stayed with you for years, perhaps something someone said without thinking, yet it became part of your identity, part of your belief system, shaping how you saw yourself, how you felt about yourself, and you didn't question it, because words have a way of entering the mind when attention is open, especially when you are vulnerable, especially when you trust the source. And as you sit with that, you may begin to understand that this same power exists within you, not just in what others say to you, but in what you say to yourself every single day, because there is a constant dialogue happening inside you, a quiet stream of thoughts, sometimes supportive, often critical, and over time, these words become agreements, silent decisions about who you are, what you deserve, what you are capable of. And once those agreements are made, they begin to feel like truth. And this is where something important reveals itself, that many of these agreements were not created consciously. They were absorbed, repeated, reinforced, until they became automatic. And without awareness, you continue to use your word against yourself, judging, blaming, criticizing, creating an inner environment that feels heavy, restrictive, and often painful. And as this realization settles in, it may feel uncomfortable at first, because it asks you to take responsibility, not in a way that blames you, but in a way that empowers you. Because if your word has been used unconsciously to create suffering, it also holds the power to create freedom, clarity, and peace. And as you begin to explore this possibility, you may start to notice how often words are used not only to express, but to harm, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly, through gossip, through assumptions, through careless comments. And while it may seem harmless in the moment, each word carries intention. Each word leaves an imprint, not only on others, but on yourself as well. And in this way, the misuse of words becomes a kind of invisible pattern, a cycle that repeats itself, where people pass along judgments, fears, and negativity without realizing that they are spreading something deeper than just opinions. They are spreading emotional weight. And when you receive those words and accept them, they become part of your internal world. And yet, in the middle of all this, there is a quiet invitation, a simple yet powerful shift to become impeccable with your word, not in a way that demands perfection, but in a way that invites awareness, integrity, and truth, where your words align with your highest understanding, where they reflect respect for yourself and for others. And as you begin to move in this direction, you may notice that being impeccable with your words starts within, in the way you speak to yourself, because this inner dialogue shapes everything else. And when you begin to soften that voice, to replace harsh judgments with understanding, to replace criticism with honesty, something within you begins to relax, to open, to heal. And from that place, your words towards others begin to change as well, becoming more thoughtful, more intentional, less reactive, because you start to see the impact they carry. You start to feel the responsibility that comes with them. And instead of using words to defend, to attack, or to control, you begin to use them to express truth, to create connection, to bring clarity. And as this shift continues, you may also become more aware of the words coming from others, noticing how easily people speak from their own fears, their own conditioning. And instead of absorbing everything, you begin to observe, to listen without immediately agreeing, to choose consciously what you allow into your mind. And this is where a deeper level of freedom begins to emerge, because you are no longer a passive receiver of words. You become selective, aware, grounded in your own understanding. And as a result, the impact of negative words begins to lose its power over you. And still, this practice is not about controlling every word perfectly. It is about intention, about returning to awareness each time you notice yourself slipping into old patterns, each time you catch yourself speaking harshly or reacting unconsciously, and gently choosing again, choosing words that align with truth rather than fear. And as you continue to practice this, something subtle yet profound begins to take shape. Your inner world becomes lighter, less burdened by constant judgment. Your relationships become clearer, less entangled in misunderstanding, and your mind begins to experience moments of quiet, moments where there is no need to defend, no need to prove, just a simple presence. And in that presence, you may start to feel a different kind of power, not loud, not forceful, but calm, steady, rooted in awareness. And this power comes from knowing that your words are aligned, that they are not working against you, but supporting you, guiding you, creating a life that feels more authentic, more peaceful. And as this realization deepens, you begin to see that being impeccable with your word is not just a practice, it is a path, a way of living where you honor the impact of your voice, where you recognize that every word is an opportunity to build or to break, to heal or to harm, to create clarity or confusion. And as you walk this path, gently, patiently, with awareness, you may notice that the need to judge decreases, the urge to gossip fades, the habit of self-criticism softens, and in its place, a quiet respect begins to grow, respect for yourself, for others, for the power of communication itself. And in this space, you begin to experience something that once felt distant, a sense of inner peace that is not dependent on circumstances, a clarity that comes not from controlling the outside world, but from aligning the inner one. And this clarity allows you to move through life with more ease, more understanding, more presence. And as you continue to integrate this awareness into your daily life, moment by moment, conversation by conversation, thought by thought, you begin to create a different kind of reality, one where your words reflect your truth, where your voice becomes a tool for growth rather than limitation, and where your inner dialogue becomes a source of support rather than conflict. And as you sit here now, listening, breathing, aware, you may begin to feel the simplicity of this agreement, not as a rule to follow, but as a gentle reminder that within you lies a powerful tool, one that has always been there, waiting to be used with awareness, with intention, with care. And in that quiet awareness, as your thoughts begin to settle, as your breath becomes steady, you may notice something shifting within you, a soft understanding, a subtle clarity, that perhaps the way you speak, the way you think, the way you express, holds more power than you ever realized. And as you continue forward, carrying this awareness with you, word by word, moment by moment, you begin to shape not just your thoughts, not just your conversations, but the very experience of your life. Gently, consciously, and with a sense of peace that grows stronger with every mindful word you choose. Nothing other people say or do is because of you. And the moment you truly understand this, your suffering begins to dissolve. And as this idea gently settles into your awareness through this audiobook, I want you to pause and feel the quiet power behind it. Because if you look closely at your own life, you may notice how often your emotions have been shaped not by what actually happened, but by how personally you took it, how deeply you allowed someone else's words, actions, or opinions to enter your inner world. And once they entered, they did not remain just words. They became feelings, reactions, stories, and over time, they began to influence the way you see yourself. And as you begin to reflect on this, you might remember moments when a simple comment changed your mood, when someone's opinion stayed in your mind longer than it should have, when a look, a tone, or even silence made you question yourself. And in those moments, it felt real, it felt personal, as if something about you was being judged, rejected, or misunderstood. And yet, what you are beginning to realize now is something deeper, something freeing, that those experiences were not truly about you, They were reflections of the other person's world, their beliefs, their fears, their conditioning. And as this understanding slowly unfolds within you, it begins to create space between what happens outside and what you feel inside. And in that space, you start to see more clearly. You begin to recognize that every person you encounter is living in their own reality, their own mental world, shaped by their past, their experiences, their agreements. And when they speak, they are not speaking from truth itself. They are speaking from their version of truth, filtered through their own lens. And as you sit with this awareness, you may begin to notice how often the mind makes everything about me, how quickly it turns a situation into something personal, how it assumes that others are thinking about you, judging you, reacting to you, when in reality, they are simply expressing themselves, navigating their own thoughts, their own emotions, their own inner struggles. And this is where something profound begins to shift, because the moment you stop taking things personally, you stop giving away your power, you stop allowing others to control your emotional state, and instead, you begin to stand in a place of inner stability, where your peace is not dependent on what others say or do. And as this shift deepens, you may start to see how taking things personally has been one of the main sources of unnecessary suffering, how it has created conflicts, misunderstandings, emotional pain, and even distance in relationships, not because of what actually happened, but because of the meaning you gave to it, the story you created around it. And as you observe this pattern within yourself, you may begin to feel a sense of release, as if you no longer have to carry every word, every opinion, every reaction, as if you can simply let things pass through you without holding on to them, without making them part of your identity. And this does not mean that you become indifferent or disconnected. It means that you become aware, you become conscious of what belongs to you and what does not. And in doing so, you create a healthier relationship with your own emotions, one that is not constantly influenced by external validation or criticism. And as you continue listening to this audiobook, you may begin to notice how this agreement naturally connects with the way you see yourself, because often, when you take things personally, it is because there is already a belief within you that resonates with what was said, a hidden agreement that says, maybe this is true, and that is why it affects you so deeply. And this is where the real work begins, not in changing others, but in understanding yourself, in becoming aware of the beliefs you carry, the stories you tell yourself, the judgments you have accepted as truth, because once you bring awareness to them, you begin to loosen their grip. And as you gently explore this inner landscape, you may start to notice how your reactions are often automatic, triggered by past experiences, shaped by old wounds. And yet, in this moment of awareness, you have a choice, a quiet, powerful choice to respond differently, to not immediately react, to not immediately take things personally. And in that pause, something beautiful happens. You create freedom, freedom from the cycle of reaction, freedom from the need to defend yourself, freedom from the constant emotional ups and downs that come from external influences. And as you begin to practice this, moment by moment, you may find that your relationships start to change, not because others have changed, but because you are no longer engaging in the same patterns, you are no longer reacting in the same way, you are no longer feeding the same emotional loops. And in this new space, communication becomes clearer, more honest, less driven by fear or defensiveness, because you are not trying to protect an image of yourself, you are simply being present, aware, grounded in your own truth. And as this awareness continues to expand, you may begin to feel a deeper sense of peace, a quiet confidence that comes not from external approval, but from internal understanding, from knowing that your worth is not defined by someone else's opinion. Your value is not determined by someone else's words. And this realization is deeply liberating because it allows you to move through life with an open heart, without fear of judgment, without the constant need for validation. And in that openness, you begin to experience life more fully, more authentically. And as you reflect on this, you may also begin to notice how often people around you are also taking things personally, how they react, how they defend, how they project their own fears onto others. And instead of getting caught in that cycle, you begin to observe it with understanding, with compassion, knowing that they too are navigating their own inner world. And this compassion does not come from a place of superiority, but from awareness, from recognizing that we are all shaped by our experiences, our beliefs, our conditioning, and that each person is doing the best they can with what they know. And as you continue to integrate this agreement into your life, you may find that emotional pain begins to lose its intensity, not because life becomes perfect, but because you are no longer interpreting everything through a personal lens. You are no longer carrying unnecessary weight. And this lightness allows you to focus on what truly matters: your growth, your peace, your connection with yourself. And as you strengthen this connection, you become less dependent on external factors for your sense of well-being. And in this state of awareness, you may also begin to notice how your inner dialogue changes, how you start to question the thoughts that arise, how you become more selective about what you believe, what you accept as truth. And this inner clarity becomes your foundation, guiding your actions, your decisions, your responses. And as you build this foundation, you create a life that is more aligned with who you truly are, not who you were conditioned to be. And as this journey continues, you may realize that this agreement is not just about avoiding pain. It is about reclaiming your power, about taking responsibility for your own emotional state, about choosing how you respond to the world. And this choice is always available to you, in every moment, in every interaction, in every experience. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes, the more it becomes a part of who you are. And as you sit here now, listening, breathing, aware, you may begin to feel a subtle shift within you, a sense of calm, a sense of clarity, a sense of freedom that comes from understanding that you are not responsible for the thoughts, words, or actions of others. You are only responsible for yourself. And in that understanding, there is peace, there is strength, there is a quiet confidence that allows you to move through life without being shaken by every opinion, every judgment, every reaction. And as this awareness settles deeper into your being, you may begin to see life differently, not as something that happens to you, but as something you experience, something you navigate with awareness, with intention, with presence. And in that presence, you begin to create a new way of living, one where you are not controlled by external influences, but guided by inner clarity, one where your peace is not fragile, but grounded, steady, resilient. And as this audiobook gently brings you into this space of understanding, you may begin to feel it more clearly now, that freedom you have been searching for, not in changing others, not in controlling the world, but in simply choosing, again and again, to not take anything personally. And in that simple yet powerful choice, you begin to experience life with a sense of ease, a sense of openness, a sense of peace that quietly grows within you, moment by moment, breath by breath, as you continue this journey of awareness and transformation. The biggest misunderstandings in your life were not created by truth, but by the stories you silently told yourself. Pause for a moment and let that sink in. Because if you look closely at your experiences, you may begin to notice how often your mind filled in the gaps, how quickly it tried to make sense of incomplete information, how naturally it created meaning where there was none, and without realizing it, those meanings turned into assumptions, and those assumptions quietly shaped your emotions, your reactions, your decisions, often leading you into confusion, conflict, and unnecessary suffering. I want you to remember a simple moment. Perhaps someone didn't reply to your message. Perhaps someone looked at you differently. Perhaps someone said something unclear, and in that small space of uncertainty, your mind didn't stay empty. It rushed to create a story, Maybe they are ignoring me. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe they don't respect me. And before you even had the chance to ask, to clarify, to understand, you already felt something, maybe hurt, maybe anger, maybe insecurity, and that feeling felt real, even though it was built on something that was never confirmed. This is the silent habit of the mind, a habit formed through years of conditioning, where uncertainty feels uncomfortable, where not knowing feels unsafe. And so the mind tries to protect you by creating answers, even if those answers are not true, even if they are based on fear rather than reality. And over time, this pattern becomes automatic, so natural that you don't even realize you are doing it. Now, as you begin to observe this pattern, something important starts to reveal itself, that assumptions are not just thoughts, they are beliefs in motion. They carry emotional weight. They influence how you see others, how you respond to situations, how you interpret reality itself. And when left unchecked, they create a kind of illusion, a false layer over the truth, making it difficult to see things clearly. Consider how many relationships have been affected by assumptions. How many conflicts started not because of what actually happened, but because of what was assumed, words misunderstood, intentions misread, silence misinterpreted, and instead of seeking clarity, the mind builds its own version of reality and then reacts to it as if it were true. This is where awareness becomes your greatest ally, because the moment you notice that you are assuming, you create a gap, a space between the thought and the reaction, and in that space, you gain the ability to choose differently, to pause, to question, to ask yourself, is this really true, or is this just a story my mind is creating? And in that simple questioning, something powerful begins to shift, because instead of being trapped in automatic reactions, you begin to move towards conscious responses. You begin to replace assumption with curiosity, confusion with clarity, fear with understanding. This shift may feel small at first, almost subtle, but its impact is profound, because it changes the way you communicate, the way you connect, the way you experience life. Instead of expecting others to know what you think, you begin to express yourself clearly. Instead of guessing what others mean, you begin to ask. Instead of holding on to silent interpretations, you open the door to honest conversation. And as you practice this, you may begin to notice how much lighter your mind feels, how much less drama exists in your inner world, because assumptions often create unnecessary emotional turbulence, a storm of thoughts and feelings that could have been avoided with a simple question, a simple moment of clarity. There is also a deeper layer to this, one that touches your relationship with yourself, because assumptions are not only about others, they are also about how you see yourself, how you define your abilities, your worth, your potential. And many of these self-assumptions were formed long ago, based on limited experiences, based on moments that were misunderstood or misinterpreted. Perhaps at some point, you assumed you are not good enough, not capable enough, not worthy enough. And without questioning that assumption, you began to live as if it were true, limiting your actions, holding yourself back, creating boundaries that were never real. But now, in this moment of awareness, you have the opportunity to see these assumptions for what they are, not facts, not truths, but ideas that can be questioned, challenged, and ultimately released. Freedom begins to emerge when you stop believing every thought that arises, when you stop treating assumptions as reality, when you allow yourself to remain open, curious, willing to see things as they are rather than as you think they are. This openness brings a different quality to your life, a sense of ease, a sense of flow, because you are no longer constantly trying to control or predict everything. You are simply present, engaged, aware. And in this presence, communication becomes more authentic, more direct, more real, because you are no longer hiding behind assumptions. You are expressing your truth. You are asking for clarity. You are creating understanding instead of confusion. It is also important to recognize that assumptions often come from fear, fear of being hurt, fear of being rejected, fear of not being in control. And while the mind believes it is protecting you by creating these assumptions, it often does the opposite. It creates more pain, more misunderstanding, more distance. So when you notice yourself assuming, instead of judging it, simply observe it. Understand that it is a habit, a pattern, and gently bring your awareness back. Remind yourself that you don't need to know everything. You don't need to fill every gap. It is okay to not know. It is okay to ask. It is okay to wait. This patience, this willingness to stay with uncertainty without rushing to conclusions, is a form of strength, a form of emotional mastery, because it requires you to stay present, to stay grounded, to trust the process rather than forcing an answer. And as this practice deepens, you may begin to notice a shift not only in your thoughts, but in your emotional experience. Less anxiety, less overthinking, less unnecessary stress, because you are no longer feeding your mind with unverified stories. You are allowing reality to unfold as it is. This clarity creates space for deeper connections, because when you stop assuming, you start truly listening, truly understanding, truly seeing others for who they are, not who you think they are. And this transforms the quality of your relationships in a way that feels natural, effortless, genuine. At the same time, this agreement invites you to take responsibility, not for what others think or do, but for how you interpret, how you respond, how you engage with your own thoughts. And in that responsibility, there is power, because it means you are not at the mercy of your mind. You are not controlled by every passing thought. You have the ability to choose awareness. This journey is not about eliminating thoughts. It is about changing your relationship with them, learning to observe without attachment, learning to question without fear, learning to remain open without rushing to conclusions. And as you continue walking this path, moment by moment, breath by breath, you may begin to feel a deeper sense of peace, not because life has become predictable, but because you are no longer trying to force certainty where there is none. You are allowing life to be what it is, without adding unnecessary layers of interpretation. This is where true clarity begins, not in knowing everything, but in seeing clearly what is in front of you, without distortion, without assumption, without projection. And in this clarity, something within you begins to relax, to soften, to trust, because you are no longer trapped in the illusions of the mind. You are present, aware, connected to reality as it unfolds. I want you to carry this awareness with you, gently, without pressure, simply noticing, simply observing, simply questioning when assumptions arise. And over time, this practice will become natural. It will become part of how you live, how you think, how you relate to the world. And as you continue this journey, you may begin to see life in a new light, not as something to figure out, but as something to experience, something to explore with curiosity rather than judgment. And in that quiet space of curiosity, where assumptions no longer dominate your perception, you may begin to feel something deeper, a sense of freedom, a sense of openness, a sense of peace that comes not from controlling reality, but from understanding it. And in that understanding, you find yourself moving through life with greater ease, greater awareness, and a quiet confidence that allows you to simply be, without the need to constantly interpret, without the need to constantly assume, just present, just aware, just here. Your best is never a fixed point. It is a living expression of who you are in this very moment. Let that idea gently settle within you, because so much of your life has been shaped by the pressure to be perfect, to always perform at the highest level, to meet expectations that were never fully your own. And in that pressure, you may have forgotten something deeply human, something incredibly freeing, that your energy shifts, your emotions change, your clarity rises and falls, and your best, naturally, changes with it. Right now, as you sit here listening, breathing, aware, There is a version of you that is doing the best it can with the awareness, the strength, and the understanding available in this moment. And yet, how often have you judged yourself for not doing more, for not being more, for not achieving more, without recognizing that you were already giving what you could? This quiet misunderstanding has created so much unnecessary weight, because when you believe that your best should always look the same, you begin to resist your own natural rhythm. You begin to fight against your own humanity, and in that resistance, frustration grows, guilt builds, and the simple act of living becomes a constant struggle to measure up. But something shifts when you begin to see your best not as a rigid standard, but as a fluid experience, something that moves with you, adapts with you, reflects your state of being in each moment. Because there will be days when your mind is clear, your energy is strong, your focus is sharp, and on those days, your best will feel expansive, powerful, effortless. And then there will be days when you feel tired, uncertain, distracted. And on those days, your best may look quieter, slower, more gentle, and both are equally valid. This understanding invites a different kind of relationship with yourself, one that is rooted not in judgment, but in acceptance, not in pressure, but in presence. And from this place, effort becomes something natural, something honest, something that flows rather than something that is forced. Consider how this connects with everything you have already begun to understand: the power of your word, the freedom of not taking things personally, the clarity that comes from not making assumptions. All of these agreements begin to find balance through this one. Because when you are simply doing your best, you are less likely to misuse your words, less likely to react to others' opinions, less likely to assume without clarity. Because your focus shifts from controlling everything to being present with what is. And in this presence, something remarkable begins to unfold. Your actions become more aligned. Your intentions become clearer. Your mind becomes quieter, because you are no longer trying to be perfect. You are simply trying to be real. I want you to notice how often perfection has held you back. How many times you didn't start something because you were afraid it wouldn't be good enough. How many times you hesitated, overthought, doubted, and in those moments, it wasn't a lack of ability that stopped you. It was the pressure of unrealistic expectations. But when you shift into doing your best, that pressure begins to dissolve, because your best is always within reach. It doesn't demand perfection. It simply asks for presence, for effort, for honesty, and from that place, action becomes easier, more natural, more consistent. This also brings a deeper sense of responsibility, not in a heavy or burdensome way, but in a freeing way, because you begin to understand that your best is something you can always offer, regardless of circumstances, regardless of outcomes. And when you give your best, you release the need to control the result. This release is powerful because so much of your stress comes from trying to predict, trying to guarantee, trying to ensure that things turn out a certain way. But when your focus shifts to simply doing your best, you allow life to unfold. You allow results to emerge naturally, without attaching your identity to them. This creates a sense of peace that is not dependent on success or failure, because you know that you showed up, that you gave what you could, that you were present, and in that knowing, there is a quiet satisfaction, a deep sense of fulfillment that comes from within. At the same time, this agreement invites you to be gentle with yourself, especially in moments when you feel like you have fallen short, because even in those moments, even in mistakes, even in setbacks, you are still doing your best based on your level of awareness at that time. This perspective removes the need for harsh self-judgment, replacing it with understanding, with compassion, with the willingness to learn and grow rather than to criticize and regret. And as you begin to live with this awareness, you may notice how your relationship with effort changes. It becomes less about proving something, less about seeking approval, and more about expressing who you are, more about engaging with life fully, more about being present in each experience. This presence brings a sense of flow, a natural rhythm where you are not constantly pushing or resisting, but simply moving with life, responding to what arises, giving your best in each moment, and allowing that to be enough. There is also a subtle strength that comes with this, a resilience that develops when you stop measuring your worth based on outcomes. Because when your value is no longer tied to success or failure, you become more open to trying, more willing to take risks, more capable of embracing challenges without fear. And in that openness, growth happens naturally, not because you are forcing it, but because you are allowing it, because you are creating space for learning, for exploration, for experience. This agreement also deepens your awareness of time, bringing you into the present moment, because your best can only exist here, not in the past, not in the future, but right now, in this breath, in this action, in this choice. And when you anchor yourself in the present, you begin to experience life more vividly, more fully, more authentically, because you are no longer lost in regrets or worries. You are here, engaged, aware. As this way of living becomes more natural, you may begin to feel a quiet harmony within yourself, a sense of alignment between what you think, what you feel, and what you do. And this alignment creates a deeper sense of peace, because there is less inner conflict, less resistance, less confusion. You are simply being, simply doing, simply living, without the constant need to evaluate or compare. And in this simplicity, there is profound beauty, because life no longer feels like something you have to control or perfect. It becomes something you experience, something you participate in, something you move through with awareness and intention. I want you to carry this understanding with you, not as a rule to follow, but as a gentle reminder that wherever you are, whatever you are doing, your best is enough, not because it meets some external standard, but because it is true to you in that moment. And as you continue this journey, you may begin to notice how this simple shift transforms everything, how it softens your inner dialogue, how it strengthens your actions, how it deepens your sense of peace. And in this quiet space of acceptance and effort, something within you begins to settle, not with finality, but with a sense of ease, a sense of trust, a sense of knowing that you don't have to be perfect to move forward. You don't have to have everything figured out to take the next step. You simply have to show up, again and again, with awareness, with honesty, with your best. And as you breathe into that understanding, you may begin to feel it now, a gentle calm, a steady presence, a quiet confidence that flows not from doing more, but from being fully here, giving what you can, and allowing that to be enough. As life continues to unfold around you and within you in its own natural, effortless rhythm. Freedom is not something you find outside. It is something you remember when you finally stop believing everything you were taught to believe. Sit with that for a moment, because what you are about to feel is not just an idea. It is a quiet turning point, a moment where something inside you begins to loosen, where the tight grip of old beliefs, old agreements, old identities begins to soften. And I want you to notice that this softening does not come from force. It does not come from fighting your past. It comes from seeing clearly, from becoming aware of the invisible structure that has been shaping your life all along. You have already begun to see how your mind was trained, how your words carry power, how taking things personally binds you, how assumptions distort your reality, how your best is a living expression, and now, something deeper calls your attention, the realization that all of these patterns are built upon agreements, silent contracts you made with yourself and with the world, often without knowing, often without choosing. These agreements formed slowly, layer by layer, through repetition, through emotional experiences, through moments where you accepted something as true. And once accepted, those ideas began to define your reality, shaping how you see yourself, how you interpret life, how you respond to every situation. And over time, they became so familiar that you stopped questioning them. You stopped seeing them as beliefs and started seeing them as facts. But now, in this moment of awareness, something shifts because you begin to see that what feels like truth is often just agreement, and what has been agreed upon can be changed. This is where the path to freedom begins, not in changing the world outside, but in transforming the agreements within, because the real prison was never physical, it was mental, emotional, built from beliefs that limited your perception, your expression, your potential. And yet, breaking these agreements is not as simple as deciding to let them go, because they are deeply rooted, reinforced by years of repetition, supported by emotions, validated by experiences. And so the process requires something more than effort. It requires awareness, patience, and a willingness to face yourself honestly. I want you to imagine your mind as a vast landscape, filled with pathways that have been walked so many times they feel automatic. And every belief, every reaction, every thought pattern is like a trail that has been reinforced over time. And now, you are not just observing these paths, you are beginning to choose whether to continue walking them or to create new ones. This choice is subtle. It happens in small moments. When you notice a thought and decide not to believe it. When you feel a reaction rising and choose not to act on it. When you catch yourself repeating an old story and gently let it go. And in these moments, you are not fighting your past. You are simply stepping out of it. But there is something important to understand here. Something that requires deep honesty, that breaking old agreements often feels uncomfortable because those beliefs, even if limiting, have been familiar. They have created a sense of identity, a sense of certainty, and when you begin to question them, it can feel like losing something, like stepping into the unknown. And yet, within that unknown lies your freedom, because beyond those agreements, beyond those conditioned patterns, there is a version of you that is not defined by fear, not limited by past beliefs, not controlled by unconscious habits. This is the part of you that observes, that is aware, that exists beyond thought, beyond judgment, beyond identity. And as you connect with this part, you begin to experience a different kind of freedom, not the freedom to control everything, but the freedom to not be controlled by your own mind. This freedom does not mean life becomes perfect. It means your relationship with life transforms, because you are no longer reacting from old patterns. You are responding from awareness, from clarity, from presence. And as this awareness deepens, you may begin to notice the voice of resistance, the part of your mind that wants to hold on to old beliefs, that questions the process, that feels uncomfortable with change. And instead of pushing it away, you simply observe it, recognizing that it too is part of your conditioning. This gentle observation is powerful because it allows transformation to happen naturally, without force, without struggle, without creating new layers of resistance. You begin to understand that transformation is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to who you were before the conditioning, before the agreements, before the layers of belief covered your natural state. And as you continue walking this path, you may start to feel a shift in your perception, a sense of lightness, as if something heavy is being released, as if the need to constantly defend, prove, or control begins to fade. This is not something dramatic. It is quiet, subtle, almost invisible, but deeply real, because it changes the way you experience everything. Your thoughts become less rigid, your emotions become less overwhelming, your reactions become less automatic. And in this space, something beautiful begins to emerge, a sense of choice, a sense of possibility, a sense that you are not bound by your past, not defined by your beliefs, not limited by your conditioning. This sense of choice is the essence of freedom, because it allows you to consciously decide how you want to live, how you want to think, how you want to respond. And with each conscious choice, you create a new agreement, one that aligns with your truth rather than your fear. These new agreements are not imposed. They are chosen, they are lived, they are practiced, and over time, They begin to reshape your inner world, replacing old patterns with new ones, replacing limitation with possibility. But remember, this is not a one-time shift. It is a continuous journey, a practice of awareness that unfolds moment by moment, day by day. And there will be times when you fall back into old patterns, times when old beliefs resurface. And in those moments, the practice is not to judge yourself, but to notice, to become aware again. This return to awareness is what keeps the process alive, what allows transformation to continue, what gently brings you back to your center again and again. And as you stay with this process, something within you begins to trust, not in a blind way, but in a grounded, quiet way, a trust that you can navigate your inner world, that you can face your thoughts without being controlled by them, that you can experience emotions without being overwhelmed by them. This trust creates a sense of stability, a sense of peace that is not dependent on external circumstances, but rooted in your relationship with yourself. And in this relationship, something profound begins to unfold, a deep sense of self-responsibility, not as a burden, but as a form of empowerment, because you realize that your experience of life is shaped not just by what happens, but by how you interpret, how you respond, how you engage with it. This realization does not mean you control everything. It means you are aware of your role in your own experience. And in that awareness, you gain the ability to shift, to transform, to grow. And as this awareness becomes more integrated into your life, you may begin to notice a different quality in your presence, a calmness, a clarity, a groundedness that was not there before, because you are no longer lost in unconscious patterns. You are present, engaged, aware. This presence allows you to experience life more fully, more deeply, without the constant interference of old beliefs, without the need to filter everything through past agreements. You begin to see life as it is, not as you were taught to see it. And in that clarity, there is a quiet beauty, a sense of wonder, a sense of connection that feels natural, effortless. And as you continue to move forward on this path, you may begin to feel a deeper sense of freedom, not as something you achieved, but as something you uncovered, something that was always there beneath the layers of conditioning. This freedom is not loud. It does not demand attention. It is quiet, steady, present, a feeling of being at ease with yourself, of being aligned with your truth, of being free from the need to constantly prove or defend who you are. And in this quiet freedom, life begins to flow differently, not because everything changes, but because you change, your perception shifts, your responses evolve, your awareness deepens. You are no longer living on autopilot. You are living consciously, intentionally, present in each moment, aware of your thoughts, your emotions, your actions. And in this conscious living, you begin to experience a different kind of joy, not dependent on outcomes, not tied to external validation, but arising naturally from within, from the simple act of being, of experiencing, of living. And as you sit here now, breathing, listening, aware, you may begin to feel it, that subtle yet powerful shift, that sense of openness, that sense of possibility, that sense that you are not limited by what you once believed. And in that feeling, something within you begins to settle, not as an ending, but as a continuation, a gentle unfolding of awareness, where each moment becomes an opportunity to see clearly, to choose consciously, to live freely. And as this awareness continues to deepen, you may begin to notice that the journey itself becomes the destination, that the process of becoming aware, of breaking old agreements, of creating new ones, is not something you finish, but something you live, something you embody. And in that embodiment, there is peace, there is clarity, there is a quiet, steady freedom that flows through you, guiding you, supporting you, reminding you, again and again, that you were never truly bound. You were only believing that you were, and now, with each breath, with each moment of awareness, You are remembering what it feels like to be free. Heaven is not a place you go to. It is a state you allow yourself to live in. Pause here for a moment, because this idea may feel distant at first, almost too simple, almost too unreal for a world that has taught you to expect struggle, to normalize stress, to believe that peace must be earned, delayed, or found somewhere far away. And yet, something within you already recognizes a quiet truth, that the quality of your life is not only shaped by what happens around you, but by the dream you are living within your own mind. You have already seen how that dream was formed, how it was built through agreements, through beliefs, through conditioning that slowly shaped your perception, turning your mind into a space filled with judgment, fear, expectations, and silent rules. And for so long, that dream felt real. It felt fixed. It felt like the only way to experience life. But now, something begins to shift, because once you become aware that it is a dream, you also begin to realize that it can change. This is where a new possibility opens, not as a distant goal, but as a present experience, the possibility of creating a different kind of inner world, one that is not dominated by fear, not controlled by old agreements, but guided by awareness, by truth, by conscious choice. I want you to imagine what your life feels like when you are no longer constantly judging yourself, when the voice inside your mind becomes softer, kinder, more supportive, when you are no longer carrying the weight of every opinion, every assumption, every expectation, when you are simply present, aware, connected to the moment as it is. This is the beginning of a new dream, not one that ignores reality, but one that sees it clearly, without distortion, without unnecessary suffering added by interpretation. Because suffering, as you have begun to understand, is often not created by life itself, but by the way the mind reacts to it, by the stories it tells, by the resistance it creates. And when that resistance fades, something remarkable happens. Life begins to feel lighter, more open, more fluid. This does not mean that challenges disappear. It means that your relationship with them transforms, because you are no longer reacting from fear, you are responding from awareness. You are no longer trapped in old patterns. You are present with what is. And in this presence, a different kind of experience begins to unfold, one that feels peaceful, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer in conflict with yourself. This inner harmony is what creates what we call heaven on earth, not a fantasy, not an escape, but a lived experience of clarity, of peace, of freedom that arises from within. And as you begin to touch this state, even for brief moments, you may notice how natural it feels, how familiar it feels, as if you are remembering something rather than creating something new. Because in truth, this state has always been within you, hidden beneath layers of belief, beneath patterns of thought, beneath emotional reactions that were learned over time. And now, as those layers begin to fall away, you begin to reconnect with a part of yourself that is already peaceful, already whole, already free. This reconnection changes everything, not in an external, dramatic way, but in a quiet, internal way that reshapes how you experience each moment. Simple things begin to feel different, more vivid, more meaningful, because your attention is no longer scattered. Your mind is no longer constantly occupied with past or future. You are here, fully present. This presence brings a sense of joy that is not dependent on circumstances, a kind of contentment that arises naturally when you are no longer resisting life. And from this place, your actions begin to reflect this inner state. Your words become more conscious. Your relationships become more authentic. Your decisions become more aligned with your truth. You are no longer acting from fear or habit. You are acting from awareness, from clarity, from a deep understanding of yourself. And this understanding continues to deepen, because the more you observe your mind, the more you see how thoughts arise, how emotions move, how patterns repeat, and instead of being controlled by them, you simply witness them. This witnessing creates space, and in that space, you find freedom, the freedom to choose how you respond, the freedom to let go of what no longer serves you, the freedom to create new agreements that align with your true nature. These new agreements are simple, yet powerful. They are lived through your awareness, through your daily actions, through the way you speak, think, and interact with the world. And as you continue to live in alignment with these agreements, your inner world becomes more stable, more peaceful, more harmonious. This harmony extends outward, influencing how you relate to others, how you handle challenges, how you navigate life's uncertainties. You begin to see others with more compassion, understanding that they too are living within their own dream, shaped by their own beliefs and experiences, and instead of reacting with judgment, you respond with awareness. This awareness creates connection, a deeper, more genuine connection that is not based on expectations or assumptions, but on presence and understanding. And in these connections, you begin to experience a different quality of life, one that feels more authentic, more real, more aligned with who you truly are. This authenticity brings a sense of freedom because you are no longer trying to be someone else. You are no longer seeking approval. You are simply being yourself, fully, honestly, without fear. And in this state, something beautiful unfolds, a sense of ease, a sense of flow, where life feels less like a struggle and more like a journey, a continuous unfolding of experiences that you move through with awareness and grace. This does not mean that life becomes predictable or controlled. It means that you become adaptable, resilient, open to whatever arises, trusting your ability to respond with clarity and presence. And as you continue to live in this way, you may begin to notice that the idea of heaven is no longer something distant, something separate from your daily life. It becomes something you experience in moments, in simple interactions, in quiet awareness. It is in the way you breathe, in the way you observe your thoughts without attachment, in the way you choose kindness over judgment, clarity over confusion, presence over distraction. And these moments begin to connect, forming a new way of living, a new dream that is not based on fear or limitation, but on awareness, on truth, on conscious choice. This dream is not perfect, but it is real, it is alive, it is evolving with you, growing as you grow, deepening as your awareness deepens. And in this continuous unfolding, you begin to understand that life is not something to be controlled or mastered, but something to be experienced, something to be lived with openness, with curiosity, with presence. This understanding brings a quiet peace, a sense of acceptance that allows you to move through life without resistance, without the constant need to change or fix everything. You simply experience, you simply observe, you simply live. And in this simplicity, there is profound beauty because you are no longer lost in the noise of the mind. You are connected to the present moment, to the reality that is unfolding right here, right now. This connection is what brings a sense of fulfillment, a sense of completeness that does not depend on external achievements or validation. It comes from within, from the awareness that you are living in alignment with your true self, that you are no longer bound by old agreements, that you are free to create your experience consciously. And as you sit here now, listening, breathing, aware, you may begin to feel this shift within you, subtle yet powerful, a sense of openness, a sense of possibility, a sense that something new is emerging. This emergence is not something you force, it is something you allow, something that unfolds naturally as you continue to practice awareness, as you continue to live in alignment with truth. And in this unfolding, you may begin to notice that life feels different, lighter, clearer, more peaceful, not because everything has changed, but because you have changed, your perception has shifted, your awareness has expanded. And in that shift, you begin to experience what was always available to you, a state of being that feels like freedom, that feels like peace, that feels like home. And as you continue to walk this path, moment by moment, breath by breath, you may find yourself returning to this state more often, resting in it more deeply, allowing it to guide you, to support you, to shape your experience of life. And in this gentle, continuous awareness, without effort, without force, something within you settles into a quiet, steady rhythm, where nothing needs to be rushed, nothing needs to be proven, nothing needs to be controlled. Just this moment, just this breath, just this simple, peaceful experience of being alive, exactly as you are. Prayer is not asking for something you don't have. It is remembering what you already are. Let these words echo softly within you, because what you are about to feel is not about religion, not about rituals, not about repeating phrases without meaning. It is something far more intimate, far more alive. It is a quiet conversation between you and your own awareness, a gentle returning to the truth that has always been within you, waiting, patient, silent. After everything you have begun to understand, after seeing how your mind was shaped, how your beliefs were formed, how your agreements created the dream you live in, there comes a moment where effort softens, where seeking slows down, where the need to fix, to change, to control begins to dissolve. And in that space, something more subtle begins to emerge, a desire not to achieve, but to connect, not to become, but to remember. I invite you now to take a slow breath, not to force anything, just to notice it, the simple movement of life within you. And as you notice this breath, you may begin to sense a quiet presence, something that has been there all along, observing, aware, untouched by the noise of thoughts, untouched by the fluctuations of emotion. This presence is where prayer begins, not as words spoken outward, but as awareness turned inward, as a gentle recognition of the life that flows through you, the consciousness that allows you to experience, to feel, to exist. I speak to you now, not as a teacher, but as a voice guiding you back to yourself, reminding you that you are not separate from the peace you seek. You are not distant from the clarity you desire. You are already connected, already whole, already enough. Feel into that for a moment, without analyzing, without questioning, just allowing the possibility to exist. And in this allowing, something begins to open, a softness, a stillness, a sense of being held by something deeper than thought, deeper than identity, a quiet knowing that you are part of something vast, something intelligent, something infinitely patient. This is the space where true prayer lives, not in asking for outcomes, but in surrendering to presence, not in seeking control, but in trusting the flow of life as it unfolds through you. You may begin to notice that when you rest in this awareness, your thoughts slow down, your body relaxes, your emotions settle, not because you force them to, but because you are no longer feeding them with resistance. You are simply observing, simply allowing. This allowing is powerful because it creates space, and in that space, clarity arises naturally, not as something you have to search for, but as something that reveals itself when the noise quiets. I want you to imagine speaking to life itself, not with words, but with presence, with openness, with a willingness to listen rather than to demand. And in that silent communication, you may begin to feel a response, not in sentences, but in sensations, in a sense of calm, in a feeling of connection. This is the language of prayer, subtle, intuitive, beyond logic, beyond explanation. And as you continue to rest in this space, you may begin to feel gratitude, not for something specific, but for the simple fact of being, for the breath that moves within you, for the awareness that allows you to experience this moment. This gratitude is not something you force. It arises naturally when you are present, when you are connected, when you are no longer lost in the illusion of lack. Because in truth, much of the suffering you have experienced came from the belief that something was missing, that you were incomplete, that you needed something outside of yourself to feel whole. But here, in this quiet awareness, you begin to see differently. You begin to feel that nothing is missing, that what you are seeking is already here, already within you. And this realization changes the nature of prayer. It shifts it from asking to appreciating, from seeking to recognizing, from effort to presence. I invite you now to gently close your eyes, if you feel comfortable, and bring your attention inward, noticing the space within you, the stillness beneath your thoughts, the silence that exists even when your mind is active. Rest in that silence for a moment, allowing yourself to simply be. In this space, there is no need to prove anything, no need to achieve anything, no need to become anything. You are already here, already complete in this moment. And as you rest here, you may begin to feel a sense of love, not the kind that depends on conditions, but a deeper, more expansive feeling, a sense of connection to yourself, to life, to everything around you. This love is not something you create. It is something you uncover, something that was always there beneath the layers of fear and belief. And as you allow yourself to feel this, even if only slightly, you begin to understand something profound, that the peace you have been searching for is not something you have to build, it is something you allow. This allowing becomes your prayer, a continuous, living expression of awareness, where each moment becomes an opportunity to return, to reconnect, to remember. You may begin to notice that this state does not require effort. It only requires attention, a gentle shifting of your focus from the noise of the mind to the stillness of presence. And in this stillness, you begin to experience a different quality of life, one that feels more grounded, more peaceful, more aligned. This does not mean that challenges disappear. It means that your relationship with them changes, because you are no longer reacting from fear, you are responding from awareness. And in that awareness, there is clarity, there is understanding, there is a quiet strength that allows you to move through life with greater ease. This is the essence of prayer, not as a separate practice, but as a way of being, a continuous connection with the present moment, with your own awareness, with the life that flows through you. And as you continue to live in this way, you may find that your need to control begins to fade. Your need to seek validation begins to soften. Your need to hold on to old beliefs begins to dissolve. In their place, something new begins to emerge, a sense of trust, a sense of openness, a sense of peace that does not depend on external circumstances. This peace is not something you have to protect. It is something you naturally experience when you are aligned with your true self. And as you sit here now, breathing, aware, connected, you may begin to feel this alignment, this quiet harmony that exists within you. There is nothing you need to add, nothing you need to remove, nothing you need to change in this moment. Just this breath, just this awareness, just this simple, profound experience of being. And as you remain here, even for a few moments longer, you may begin to notice that this state feels familiar, as if you have always known it, as if you are simply remembering something you had forgotten. This remembering is the heart of your journey, not becoming something new, but uncovering what was always true. And in this gentle, continuous remembering, life begins to feel different, softer, clearer, more peaceful, not because the world has changed, but because you have returned to yourself. And as this awareness deepens, moment by moment, breath by breath, you may find that there is nothing left to seek, nothing left to chase, only this quiet presence, this steady connection, this simple, beautiful experience of being alive, here, now, exactly as you are. Your life changes the moment you realize you were never trapped. You were only following agreements you never questioned. Stay with that feeling, because this is not an ending. It is a quiet awakening, a moment where everything you have explored begins to come together, not as separate ideas, but as a living understanding inside you, something you can feel, something you can carry, something you can live. I want you to gently look back, not to analyze, not to judge, but to notice how far your awareness has moved, how you began by seeing that your mind was shaped, that your beliefs were not all your own, that your thoughts were influenced by a world that trained you to see, think, and react in certain ways. And from that realization, a door opened. Through that door, you began to notice your words, how powerful they are, how they shape your inner world, how they can either build or break your experience. And as you became more aware, you started to see the importance of speaking with intention, with honesty, with integrity, not just to others, but to yourself. And from there, something softened within you. The need to take everything personally began to fade, as you saw that other people's words and actions are reflections of their own world, their own beliefs, their own experiences. And in that understanding, you reclaimed your emotional freedom. You stopped carrying what was never yours to carry. That freedom created space, and in that space, you saw how often your mind fills the unknown with assumptions, how quickly it creates stories, how easily it turns uncertainty into confusion. And as you became aware of this pattern, you began to replace assumption with clarity, reaction with curiosity, confusion with understanding. And as this clarity grew, you discovered something deeply grounding, the idea of simply doing your best, not a perfect best, not a forced best, but an honest best, one that changes with you, one that respects your energy, your state, your humanity. And in that acceptance, you release the constant pressure to be more than you are in each moment. This release opened the path even further, leading you to see that all of these patterns, all of these reactions, all of these limitations were built upon agreements, silent beliefs that shaped your reality. And with awareness, you began to question them, to gently step out of them, to create space for something new. And in that space, a new way of living began to emerge, a new dream, one not controlled by fear, not defined by limitation, but guided by awareness, by presence, by conscious choice, where peace is not something you chase, but something you allow. And as you rested in that awareness, something even deeper unfolded, a connection, a stillness, a quiet presence within you that does not depend on anything outside, a space where you can simply be, where you can feel whole, where you can experience life without resistance. Now, as you sit here in this moment, I want you to feel how all of this is not separate. It is one continuous flow, one unfolding journey, where each realization leads to another, where each moment of awareness deepens your connection with yourself. This journey does not end here. It continues with you, in your thoughts, in your actions, in your choices, in the way you speak, in the way you respond, in the way you live your life each day. Because the real transformation is not in listening, it is in living. It is in bringing this awareness into your everyday moments, into your conversations, into your reactions, into your quiet inner dialogue. I invite you to notice your words from this moment forward, to speak with intention, to choose truth over fear, to create an inner environment that supports you rather than limits you. I invite you to remember that nothing others say or do defines you, that your worth is not determined by external opinions, that you are free to remain centered, grounded, at peace regardless of what happens around you. I invite you to question your assumptions, to seek clarity, to communicate openly, to allow space for understanding instead of filling it with stories that create unnecessary suffering. I invite you to do your best, not as a demand, but as a gift to yourself, a way of showing up fully, honestly, without pressure, without comparison, simply being present with what you can give in each moment. I invite you to continue breaking old agreements, gently, patiently, with awareness, not forcing change, but allowing it, trusting that each moment of awareness is a step towards freedom. And most importantly, I invite you to return to yourself again and again, to that quiet space within you, where there is peace, where there is clarity, where there is a deep sense of being enough. This is not something you achieve once. It is something you practice, something you remember, something you reconnect with moment by moment. And as you continue this journey, you may begin to notice subtle shifts, moments where you pause instead of react, moments where you choose understanding over judgment, moments where you feel peace even in the middle of uncertainty. These moments are not small. They are powerful. They are signs that you are living consciously, that you are transforming, that you are creating a new way of experiencing life. And over time, these moments begin to connect, forming a new pattern, a new rhythm, a new way of being that feels natural, effortless, aligned. You may not notice the change all at once, but it is happening quietly, steadily, with each breath, with each choice, with each moment of awareness. And in this quiet transformation, something beautiful unfolds, a life that feels more peaceful, more clear, more connected, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer in conflict with yourself. This is the real freedom, not freedom from life's challenges, but freedom from unnecessary suffering, freedom from limiting beliefs, freedom from unconscious patterns. And in this freedom, you begin to experience life more fully, more deeply, more authentically. Now, before we gently come to a pause in this shared journey, I want to ask you something simple, something meaningful, something that connects us beyond this moment. If this experience, this audiobook, has brought even a small shift in your awareness, if it has helped you see something differently, feel something more clearly, understand something more deeply, then I invite you to support this journey. Take a moment to like this, to share it with someone who may need it, someone who is searching, someone who is struggling, someone who is ready to see differently, because sometimes a single message at the right time can change everything. And if you want to continue this journey, if you want to keep exploring, keep growing, keep expanding your awareness, then subscribe to CliffNote Chronicles, where more self-help audiobooks, more insights, more transformative journeys are waiting for you. This is not just content. This is a space for growth, a space for awareness, a space for transformation, and you are always welcome here. And now, as you take a slow breath, as you gently return your attention to this moment, I want you to carry something with you, not as a memory, but as a feeling, a quiet knowing that you are not limited, that you are not defined by your past, that you are capable of living with awareness, with peace, with clarity. Just this breath, just this moment, just this simple awareness that you are here, alive, present, and free to choose how you experience your life, one moment at a time, in a way that feels true, in a way that feels real, in a way that feels like coming home to yourself.